Jay, last week we had two almost identical cars. They were identical twins. We had the same engine, the same transmission. One was a Buick, one was a Chevrolet, but they were like the same car. Right. Have we gone too far this time?
I'm going to say no. I have an apple.
I've got an orange.
So they're both fruits. They both do the same thing, but they're very different.
How are we going to compare a turbo CUV with a hybrid CUV?
We're going to take the functionality route. So the RAV4 can be had without a hybrid if you so choose, and the Mazda can be had without a turbo if you so choose. We're going to go for what it's like as far as fit and finish goes, what the cargo space is like, and general livability between these two.
Now, isn't there also a price gap between these two?
Not as big as you'd think.
But there's a size difference between these two as well.
It looks like it's a bigger size difference straight on because the RAV4 is a little taller and the Mazda CX-50 is a little longer.
Okay, so they're not actually that different.
They're surprisingly similar.
So we are kind of going to pretend that this is a 2.5 NA, and we're going to kind of pretend that that's a 2.5 non-hybrid. The reason is that we're not really going to compare the drivetrains here. We're more comparing the SUVs themselves. Which is the better value, which is better to live with every single day, and which is better for weekend adventurers like yourself that like to strap a kayak to the roof and go see some lighthouses.
Well, let's find out and see if 4 is more than 50 or 50 is more than 4.
Jay, I think that's a really simple question, but you know what? Don't bring your calculator. Well, let's just get in the cars.
Okay.
Which car do you want to start with?
Let's start with the Mazda.
It is a bigger number. All right, so now we're in the Mazda CX-50. We're going to find out if 50 is more than 4. I can't believe you got me doing it.
So you do want an abacus for Christmas.
All right, so what's the first thing that strikes you when you start driving in the Mazda CX-50?
It's heavy. The steering is heavy. It feels not overtly heavy like a CX-90, but for the class of vehicle and comparing it to the RAV4, there's a lot more heft in the steering wheel.
It's a bigger vehicle, but it also feels bigger. Like it noticeably feels more like trucky when you drive it, which when someone says Mazda is not what I would have thought.
No, the CX-5 drives like a Mazda 3, but I feel that the CX-50 drives closer to a CX-90. Like it's just that next level of weight.
Yeah.
Not only beneath my right foot, but in the steering wheel as well.
And I think I agree. I was actually kind of disappointed by the driving experience of the CX-50. I will give it a little bit of an asterisk because this is the Meridian edition, which comes with really nice, chunky Falcon off-road tires. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that is going to really affect the driving experience. They're not like Bridgestone Potenzas or something sporty. But, you know, it does drive big, like an SUV. But beyond just the driving experience, tell me about what you think of this interior, because I like it.
It is premium. I love it. I love the cross-stitching, which doesn't come on every trim. But for the CX-50, the majority of your touch points as a driver, they're soft and they feel really good. Like soft, soft, soft. A little harder there, but that's where the window switches are. But from a visual perspective and a tactile perspective, this is the best interior in class for me.
And we get a nice big panoramic sunroof, whereas the RAV4 only gives us a little baby one.
Lots of light in a darker cabin, always a positive.
And I think the word I would use for this interior is elegant, which is a rare adjective in the segment. You don't usually say elegant for this type of crossover. And if you'll forgive me, I'm going to pull up my phone and check the pricing notes, because I have them. Because it feels more premium inside, and that's because it costs a little more premium. And we're going to actually turn on the ventilation, Jay.
It's such an easy process. You don't have to play around with a screen and get fingerprints on it. And as Clayton looks for the pricing, you can get your Apple CarPlay to be responsive to the touch, but the screen's so far set back that just use the rotary dial. It works perfectly for me. If BMW has no issues with it, Mazda has no issues with it, and that means I have no issues with it.
I have some issues with it. It's not as easy as the touchscreen. It's not as intuitive. However, it's better than touching the actual screen and getting smudges all over it, which drives me nuts. The pricing, by the way, 41,000 to start, 51,000 as tested, and I believe this is at or near the top range model. It's about as loaded as it gets, and like you said, you get really nice soft touch interior touch points. You get a heated wheel, but it's not 360 degrees. It is one of those like only on the sides kind of heated wheel situations.
Somebody at Mazda, please spend the extra $5 for the coils.
Could we please just like a heated wheel? I paid for the whole wheel.
I wouldn't like it to be heated. Please and thank you.
So there's that. The other thing is that I like how distinct this is versus the RAV4. It's got really cool styling. It's got flared fenders, for crying out loud. Like, it's a really unique and well-styled vehicle, and in this segment, that is rare.
A lot of generic design happens here, and it's because they can. It's one of Canada's hottest segments, and you could put out, something with very little character, very little personality, and it's still going to sell.
Exactly. But, it's a distinctive look, and I think that's a real point it has above the RAV4, is that the RAV4 just looks like another RAV4. This looks a little unique, and if you want to stand out, it's a good option for that.
Not everybody wants what's popular. I completely understand that. Even on the highest trims of a lot of the competitors, you don't get the finesse that you get here.
You know what else you get here that you don't get in the RAV4?
What's that?
Towing capacity. Towing capacity for any CX-50 is 2,000 pounds, which is the same as a base Ford Maverick pickup. However, if you equip it with the turbo engine like we have, an optional extra, that towing capacity goes up to 3,500 pounds. That's like a real towing capacity. You could tow like a boat or a camp trailer or other weekend things. So if you actually are gonna do Bear Grylls things on the weekend, then this is actually good, because though the Toyota RAV4 does have a tow hitch, it also has a sticker on it that says do not tow. And the tow rating on the RAV4 is pretty small. I think it's like 1,500 pounds. You're not gonna tow anything really with it.
Substantial as you could and should, for that matter, here.
Yeah. So that's a unique feature the CX-50 has that I like. But I would say, the pluses. We love the cabin. We love the styling. Minuses, we don't love the driving experience, which is something that Mazda usually nails.
It has never felt like 310 or 320 pound-feet of torque, depending on 87 versus high-octane fuel. And I think a lot of that flash on paper is taken away by the weight of the vehicle itself. And I like the liveliness that I get behind the wheel of a non-turbo CX-50. I don't need all that power. There's not really a lot of places you can go to fully exercise that. Now, the one exception is, as Clayton said, if you are towing, by all means, tick the box that gets you the turbo engine. But if you're just running around the city and just doing things in an urban setting, the naturally aspirated engine is more than fine.
That is true. Worth noting that the fuel mileage in liters per 100K is okay. You get 10.4 city and 8.2 highway, which is okay for the segment. And like Jay said, it makes peak power numbers on 93 octane. You don't need that.
No.
I think it's like 20 extra horsepower and 10 extra pound-feet of torque. You're not going to miss it. You're not going to notice it. Fill it up on 87. You'll just be happier. And that kind of does it for our drive segment in the orange. Shall we go pick up our apple?
I think we should.
Okay, let's go get our apple. All right, and now we're in the Toyota Recreational Activity Vehicle 4-wheel drive. That's what RAV4 actually stands for.
Good job on the research.
And this one is a hybrid, but we're gonna pretend it's not. First things I notice is that the inputs are a lot smoother and a lot lighter, and the car overall drives
easier,
more car-like.
Yeah.
I also like that the ride is smoother than the CX-50 around town. Over these bumps we have, even out in the country, it's just smoother. The whole experience is smoother, and part of that is the hybrid system, but I'm trying to remove that from the equation because we said we're going to ignore it today. Now, the other thing you notice inside the RAV4 is that the interior is kind of boring.
It's utilitarian.
It's very functional. Just like the Mazda, I give high grades for how it works. I can adjust the HVAC, I can adjust my seat, I can adjust the radio. All the common functions are super duper easy in the RAV4. So for that, I give it super high marks, just like the CX-50. However, unlike the CX-50, it's boring.
And that's okay, because boring and functional are two words that I'm fine with pairing. So to change your temperature settings or where you want the air, there's big dials and there are big buttons. In the CX50 to change your drive modes, it's a tiny little toggle. In the RAV4, it's a pretty big dial. Everything's so function focused first here. There's a little tray to put your phone in above the glove box.
I have a phone cubby here to the left of the wheel, which I think is a fun little trick.
It's great, and the infotainment system, while not the largest or high resolution for graphics in the industry, matches the RAV4 perfectly.
And it is an actual regular touchscreen which I can reach without having to disjoint my left elbow. Nothing gets a mark for being not functional. Everything absolutely works. Even these cloth seats are super duper comfortable.
And there's a cool pattern on them. I know you shouldn't use that as a buying factor, but I think Toyota realizes the RAV4 can be a little vanilla, so they're just trying to add little bits of sprinkles to the RAV4 in different trims, whether it's gasoline, hybrid, or plug-in hybrid, to help it be less boring. And I think it's working.
I'm less convinced. I mean, the thing is, the RAV4 for this generation does look a bit more trucky, but it's still a RAV4. I passed 4 of them on my way to the shoot today, and of those, half of them were probably Ubers. So, you know, if you want to stand out, it's not the car, because it is the most popular, best-selling kind of car in its segment in Canada. They sell so many of these, and you see them a lot. But you just can't knock it for practicality. Not only are the seats comfortable, not only are the controls easy to use, but despite having a smaller footprint than the CX50, it actually gives up nothing in terms of passenger space or cargo volume. I mean, the CX50 does technically have more,
however,
but we're talking like a 10% difference.
Right. So instead of towing all that stuff behind you in the RAV4 with its minimal towing capacity, you can just throw most of that stuff inside.
It is also worth noting that even though this has a hybrid powertrain, which absolutely decimates the CX50 in fuel economy, there is also a non-hybrid powertrain, which also gets better fuel economy than the CX50, either of its engines. It's just a smaller vehicle, it's more efficient, and it does also have a CVT transmission, which kind of decreases driving fun and sportiness. We're not supposed to talk about the hybrid option, but it is only $2,000, and if you're buying a RAV4, do yourself a favor and frankly get the hybrid. It is the best $2,000 you'll ever spend. The fuel economy, the smoothness, the flexibility, it's really the way to go on the RAV4. Even though for this comparison, we're gonna pretend it's not. Jay, you've got some handy notes. You want to tell us about RAV4 pricing?
I certainly do.
Please do.
Well, the base price for this is $37,780, and our as-tested price goes up a little bit to $44,400. The base non-hybrid RAV4 starts at only $35,080. You got to tack on your $1,930 for freight and PDI. Regardless of what trim you get, how you slice it, there is incredible value both today and in the long term with anything Toyota.
That's true. We did talk about that, about the residual value. But that's a good point, is that, you know, these two are pretty close if you compare the hybrid to the CX50. Mm-hmm. But if you just take non-hybrid to obviously base CX50, like there's a pretty big value gap there in the advantage of the Toyota. And on these bumpy pavement pieces like right now, I feel more comfortable in the Toyota.
I feel a little more comfortable in the CX50 only because it's such a heavy vehicle, and you feel that extra bit of absorption from the road with the imperfections. At least that's what I find. I find with Toyota you feel more on the road than you do in the CX50.
You know, I think that the summary here is that it nails all the hard points, but I don't love it. You know, like, it's not a car that's like, yeah, I just feel like I want to drive it to Moncton.
There's no passion behind driving a RAV4.
No, it does absolutely everything that I ask of it, and I am not satisfied. Getting great fuel economy. I'm looking at our fuel gauge, it's barely moved. We've had this, it's Thursday, we've had this car almost all week. It's just on this shoot has it come off the peg. It's ridiculous. The mileage this thing gets is actually a joke.
You could realistically go in and around 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah, you could actually.
For a full tank of fuel.
I think we're gonna put $20 in it across a week.
I think we'll put $5 in it, maybe 10.
But I mean, it's also like practical to a fault. Like the interior in here, it commits no crimes, but it wins no awards. It's simply there. To be fair, we are contrasting the full Zoot version of the CX50 against a mid-trim version of the RAV4 with cloth seats, the XLE to be exact.
I don't think leather seats and a bigger sunroof and fancier bits and pieces would make it a fair fight.
That's true. No amount of leather is going to change the fact that this kind of is the interior.
It is the interior.
You can put nicer leather on the seats, but it's the same seats.
Right, every RAV4 will have the same HVAC system,
Yes.
the same infotainment, and the same layout.
But I do give it marks above the CX50 for practical things. Like interior storage in this is amazing. Like great cup holders, a cup 2 here, one on the side of each door, multiple phone cubbies. Jay, you've got 2 phones under the dash right now.
It's fantastic, and you've got this big space in front of you, you've got your USB port, and if it's function first for you in your search for a compact crossover, the RAV4 should be high up on your list.
Yeah, I think the same thing. You know, it's also a taller vehicle, even though the Mazda is longer. The RAV4 is actually a taller vehicle, so if you're doing something like loading kids into the back, it's actually easier a little bit in the Toyota.
With the ingress, egress, and if you have maybe some slight mobility issues, right? It's an easier slide into the RAV4 only because it's higher as opposed to the CX50.
Well, Jay,
Well, Clayton,
we've arrived back where we started, and we've been talking a lot about the heart and about the head. It's time to figure out which one wins.
is 4 greater than 50?
That's not how math works.
Could somebody please start a GoFundMe for an abacus for Clayton?
Oh my God. Long story short, we have to pick a winner. So let's get this thing parked,
Right.
and argue a bit. So now that we've driven both of these on camera, but we've also driven them for the better part of a week, we have to pick a winner.
The heart wants what the heart wants, mostly. And my heart wants the Mazda CX-50.
Why is that?
It looks better on the inside. There's a incredibly high level of quality and detail from the cross-stitching to the seats to the easy-to-use infotainment system.
It does feel really, really premium inside the Mazda. I have to agree with you.
I like the exterior styling. I don't want something that's necessarily as high as the RAV4, says my heart. I like the ruggedness of it. I like that I can be Bear Grylls on the weekend as opposed to Michael Scott. And it's all the aspirational side. And that's why my heart wants the Mazda CX-50.
But inevitably, we also have to talk about the brain.
That pesky thing
I
always
know.
gets in the way of the heart.
But there's a lot of really good logical reasons why the RAV4 is a strong contender.
Name 4.
Okay, easy. Number 1, initial value. Really good initial purchase price value for the RAV4 and the hybrid. Hybrid is only $2,000 extra above the regular RAV4, and frankly, you should spring for the hybrid.
Absolutely. The cost of entry is minimal, and your long-term savings is absolutely fantastic. And speaking of long-term savings, the resale value on Toyota and the longevity and the reliability, and we're not just saying that because we're in front of a camera, you can go look up all the studies on Toyota's reliability and they are sky high.
It's true. We don't usually talk about like long-term resale and reliability because we don't have a crystal ball. However, with the Toyotas, the resale is so strong and the reliability is exceptionally so good, we actually do need to talk about it because it is actually a buying point. That if you buy this car and you drive it and take decent care of it for 2 or 3 years, you're probably going to sell it for pretty much what you've got into it, which is insane for a new vehicle. And then there's other things too, like despite the fact that it's a smaller footprint, actually doesn't compromise on passenger space or cargo volume.
Even the space up front for the driver and your front passenger is pretty generous, and that way you can actually fit, well, not quite 5, but you can definitely fit 4 comfortably, and in a pinch you use that middle seat. For the functionality and reliability side, the RAV4 gets the nod from me.
I think that's true. And I mean, there is something to be said too about the CX50 being really, really unique. It's a good looking car, it looks unique, and there's not very many of them, versus literally the most common, the most popular CUV on sale today. It's another RAV4. That's why everyone buys them, because it's a known quantity, but if you just gotta be a little different, another RAV4 might not cut it.
In Mazda's defense, it's not a mainstream brand like Toyota and Hyundai. It's its own premium brand. It stays in its own lane. It does what it does exceptionally well. But at the end of the day, like you said, the brain gets some more points over the heart.
So we would both agree that the Mazda has won our hearts. We like the way it looks inside and out, and it appeals to us on an emotional level. But we also have to be cold, heartless jerks and say that the RAV4 is better value. It is compromises nothing on interior and passenger space, and at the end of the day, I gotta go with the brain on this one. The RAV4 is the winner of this Driving.ca comparison test.
Double checking my abacus, in this review, 4 is greater than 50.
That's still not how math works, but for Driving.ca, I'm Clayton Seames.
I'm Jay Canna.
And don't forget to let us know in the comments what 2 cars we should compare next.
For more news, reviews, and information you can use on compact crossovers, hybrids, gasoline, turbo, all your car needs, visit Driving.ca, and don't forget to engage with us on our social media platforms.
Smash that like button.